As a crafter, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, we don't like waste, do we? We don't want to waste all the bits that come out of our stencils, especially when we're doing it with our favourite cardstock. So I'm going to show you what you can do with the waste. I'm going to show you the snowflake, because we've just done the snowflake with the layered card, so I had all that cut out. And I will be honest, I had 2 or 3 mats on the go at once, but you don't have to. I just did that so that I could have it all cut in. One was cut in while I was sticking down the other one, but I want to give you some tips and hints on the best way to do this. So I'm going to bring in a canvas that I've done, which is from another piece that I've designed, which you'll see on the shows. But this is the waste bits for the layered flower. This is the dahlia, and this is all the waste bits layered up. But I'm going to talk you through how you get to this point, but I'm going to do it with the snowflake because that looks fabulous, doesn't it? And the dimension, look at that. And it's just all the bits that are left behind, because I do not want to put those in the bin. That will break my heart, especially with my American Crafts cardstock. Look how dimensional that looks. It's phenomenal, isn't it? I love it. And there's the faux stitching, of course, because that's who I am and my brain won't let me not do it. So I'm going to give you some tips. First of all, you're going to cut out of the 3 layers. So remember, we did lilac, we did a mid blue, and we did a pale blue. And of course, you're going to cut your stencil. Again, this could be cut out of card if you don't want to use this for dough flakes, because we're not using any wet mediums. And I'm going to position this now. I've got some spray adhesive on the back. So I've got my stencil spray from Cadence on the back. And again, you could use the stencil glue from Pinflair, whatever you've got. I don't want you to think you have to go out and buy loads of new stuff just to be able to do this. If you want to, great, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. Now, you could get the machine to draw this, and it would draw that design onto your card for you. And I tried it, and it worked beautifully, and it would be great for your Sanntangle or your doodling inside it. But what I found was you had to then be pinpoint accurate when you glued your waist into place, because you would see that line if you didn't. So the way I worked it out was I thought, right, if I cut a stencil and I put my nib inside the stencil and I just physically draw inside the stencil, you're not going to see it because it's going to be slightly in. It's almost like you're creating an inward offset line. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so this is what I did, and I won't do all of it because it will be literally like watching paint dry, but just hold your pen as vertically as you can. I'm using a light grey, it's one of the Ink Lily fine liners. And it doesn't matter if you don't go straight like there, it's moved a little bit. Just try and keep it straight because I haven't put any new stencil spray on, that's why. And you don't need to press down hard, but just go in. And by putting your nib vertically against the edge, it will just glide around like that. Okay, so you're going to do that with all of your stencil. And you're going to just draw inside, like so, until you've got the whole thing drawn in. And then when you take this off, you'll know where to put your pieces. All right, so I'm going to bring in one that I've more or less finished, because again, you don't want to sit there and watch me do that, but I've got some little areas here that I still need to build up. So I started with the chevrons, and if I show you this again, here I've got the purple, so the thickest one goes down first, then your mid blue, and then your light blue. And you go around and you stick all those in place. And I use my Pinflair bookbinding glue because it's got a nice fine nozzle and I found it really easy to use. Then what I did was I did these pieces. So you can see you've got your purple popping out there, then your mid blue, then your light blue, and then the circle in the centre. And then I went in and did all these little fronds on your snowflake. So I'm just going to finish this off. And what I like to do with these to make it, because if you sent that as a card, it's lovely, but it's a bit flat. So I want to make it look a little bit more dimensional. So I've got all my little pieces here. I'm amazed that I managed to keep all these together and not lose them on the journey up here, because normally I think I'm all prepped and then I get here and I'm like, oh, I've lost one piece. But I will show you what you can do with that. If you ever lose one piece, in fact, I'll just tell you now, if you ever lose one piece, and you think, oh, I've got to cut that whole thing out again just to cut that one piece, because the detail is grouped, remember. I send it into Canvas Workspace, get rid of the outside edge so I can access all those little pieces. I grab the piece that I want, I move it off to one side, I get rid of everything else, I download it and I cut it out of a scrap piece of card. So you don't have to cut the whole thing again, because that would be soul destroying, because you're just wasting card then. So absolutely just move one of the shapes. I'm going to show you that in one of the videos. Just move it to one side, delete everything else off, download that back down, cut it out. It's that simple. So I like to work, as I said, with the Pinfly bookbinding glue. I also like to use a pair of tweezers because some of these pieces are really small. If you struggle with dexterity, just make the image bigger. Just make it bigger to whatever suits you. And they come down in size. So what I do is I cut the stencil. So I cut the purple one. I took all the main piece away and all the leftover bits of card away, but I left all these bits in place. So I didn't explain that very well. So I'm going to explain it again. Got a piece of purple card. I cut the design out. I take the bit, this bit, if you like, away of purple, and all these bits I leave on my mat. And then I can take them from my mat so I know exactly which piece goes where. Don't take them all off your mat, because then you're hunting like a jigsaw piece for the right piece. So I did all the purple, then I did the blue, then I did the light blue, and I did it that way, and it makes it really easy because it's just paper piecing then, but in reverse if you like. This glue wants to come out already, it's eager today. So I'm just going to pop a little bit and I'm just putting it in the bottom. So where that point is at the bottom, so this is the top part. I know it looks like the bottom because I'm holding it that way, but I'm putting it here, putting the glue just there. Okay, and then I'm going to turn my work round so it's comfortable for me to work. And I'm going to position that and just glue it in place. If you don't want it to be dimensional, you can put glue all over it. But if you do want it to be dimensional, just put it towards the bottom edge and try and just not overuse your glue, because you don't want to see glue, especially again if you're working on darker cards or like a mirror card. So a tiny bit, that's far too much glue for that little piece. So I just dab it on the back of my hand and that bit will do for the next one. And then I'm going to turn that round, just pick up a bit more because I've moved it, and do this side like that. And I'm lining it up so that it just sits on top of that blue, but I'm also looking at the point here to make sure that it's straight all the way up. And you just continue with that until your pattern is done. And I just thought I didn't want to do the whole thing for you because that would take forever. But I thought it was a nice technique to show you because there's no way I could put all that lot in the bin. It just wasn't happening. Right, so pick up the next bit of glue. So you can see we need very little. And then you're going to leave this to dry thoroughly, okay? I'm just going to do that because I find it easier. Just patch test, or if you don't like putting it on your skin, you can put it on a glass mat. Just be aware that a glass mat, you need to clean it off after you've, well, don't wait for it to dry solid because it's really difficult to get off glass. And then the last piece is going to go on there like that, okay? And then I'm going to start on the pieces that I'd already done. So all I'm going to do is get my tweezers underneath now, she says. Maybe I stuck that one down, don't know, there you go. Do that and then just pull it up. I've stuck the purple ones down completely flat, so your base layer is going to go flat. And then these, you're going to work round like that, and you're just going to pull them up. And this is why I find reverse tweezers easy, because I just, once I've gripped it, I can let go. I'm not keeping that pressure on, and I find them easier to use. So we're just going to pull these up. Like this. And just work your way around, and that gives it a little bit more dimension. And once you've bent that card, you could still get it in an envelope. It will never go completely flat again, but it would work in just a regular envelope. And then the recipient, when they receive it, can just pull these bits up. So it's a bit of a interactive thing for them to do as well. But I just think it adds that little bit extra dimension, and I think it's nice, especially for Christmas, because we want really wow cards, don't we, at Christmas? They can be simple, but we really want them to stand out from everybody else's Christmas cards. So it's just a nice way of adding that little bit of difference, so it's not just flat, but it's not loads and loads of layers with thick foam tape that you then struggle to post. So yeah, it's nice. And if you're making one card, you might as well make one with the waist at the same time, because it just makes sense, and it's just better value for money, isn't it, really? That's all there is to it. Right, so now I'll just do this last piece here. And all I'm doing is I'm resting my tweezers on my hand, so all I'm doing is opening that, grabbing it and lifting. My brother do a set of reverse tweezers as well, so maybe you've got those already. But then that just adds that depth and dimension, so it almost looks like it's been paper cut, and you end up with that. Now what I would also do is I would mat and layer this on the same colours as the card that you've used on here. So maybe use my purple one is the biggest one on here, so I would use that as the mat at the back. So I'd do probably pale blue first, then a mid blue, and then the purple, and then everything will tie in. Or you could just pop that onto the front of a card and have your sentiment in the middle. Just really quick, really easy, really fun. But when we then, I'm just going to bring this back in for you, when we then start to take it onto a bigger scale with the different pictures, look how different that looks. So that's just all the waist bits that would have come out. I just think it's really cool, and it gives you a completely different look when you're paper piecing back in. Why do I not paper piece back into my stencil? Because the stencil is quite deep, so it's got a depth to it here, and trying to get card right into these little pieces here is quite difficult. And I tried it, but it made it hard work to then get the stencil off, because unless you line it up with absolute precision, there'll be some parts where the card's just slightly above the dough flex, somewhere it's gone down further. It's a bit of a pain in the neck to do. So I would do it that way. Put your stencil down, draw through it. If the machine draws it, remember, it draws it as the line, so you've got to be really precise again when you're sticking on top of those drawn lines. If you do it on the inside of the stencil, because if I take my pen, I've got this distance that's against that there, so the ink line isn't going exactly on the cut line, it's slightly inside. That means that you can still see the guideline, but it doesn't show when you've put everything down. So if I bring this back in, there are grey lines underneath that, but you can't see a single one of them. You still have to be precise, but you don't have to be that precise. And it's frustrating if you have a line that you can see and it's just here and there, it throws the eye off, whereas that looks like it's been made professionally. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Now we're going to talk about what we do with the waist from a stencil. So the actual dough flex. This is super cool. I'll see you in a minute.